Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. QLPOR, as it's widely known, features a bevy of poets, spoken word artists, and live poetry readings with best-selling authors. Your host is Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Tonight, my special guest is famed multidisciplinary artist Courtney Martin. Their achievements cover a wide range of areas. They have just published, a little while ago, they published a poetry prose chapbook, the Book of IP, Idle Poems. This book of poetry prose is available on Amazon via Alien Buddha Press. Their second book, Slam Poems for My Bathroom Mirror and Other Selected Works, is available in the next few days. Please help me welcome Courtney Martin to the podcast. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for that. I don't know about fame, but I receive it.
Well, it's always important to me to make my guests feel good, you know.
And that made me feel so good. Thank you so much for that introduction. It is wonderful to be here.
You're more than welcome. Let's begin this poetic journey. Courtney, what is poetry? What is poetry?
Poetry is the use of language as a shorthand. I say shorthand, it can also be a longhand, but typically a shorthand to cut to the heart of a matter. It's almost like, I think, the most sort of telepathic way, an empathic way to use language. Just counting that interpretation will do its job more than sort of necessarily over qualifying what it is that you're saying. I know it's kind of general.
All right. Okay. Tell me more. I want you to flesh it out for me. Tell me more about poetry from the heart. I like that. Tell me more.
Yes. So I have been sort of called back to poetry. It's something that I loved writing as a kid, just as a form of expression. And, you know, as I sort of hunkered down and started to pursue other things, because I've been working in the film industry for some time, and that's what I studied in school. Mm-hmm. There's something about poetry that I think is indicative of your inner monologue, and it is truer to your inner monologue. It's something that I think goes through fewer sort of translation processes than if you're writing prose or anything else. At least that is my approach to it. It's a very sort of autonomous process. And, you know, it's something that I found my way back to after spending so much time pursuing screenwriting, where you have to communicate your intent crystal clear for the greatest number of people who could be reading it.
Yes.
Where I've actually found my sort of voice in poetry, and I found the effectiveness in poetry, is if I am communicating exactly what I feel on the page and it makes sense to me and it's true to what I'm trying to express, then if other people have to interpret it, then they still seem to appreciate it more than if I try to spell something out for them. So it's very validating in that way for me.
All right. Based on what you know about the world, your lived experience, in general, is poetry important in this day and time?
Absolutely. Poetry is absolutely important in this day and time. And, we just briefly talked a little bit about some of the things that are going on in the world, some of the heartbreaking things, the oppression and genocide and things like that happening in the world today. Mm-hmm. And, poetry, I think, is one of the most humanizing forms of literature out there. I mean, not to take anything away from prose, not to take anything away from essays or anything like that, but when you are really sharing intimately the most raw sort of interpretation of what you feel, I think that's a level of vulnerability. You're not necessarily trying to convince anybody of anything. You're not necessarily trying to win an argument. All you are doing is staying true to your interpretation of something, and you are relying on the vulnerability of just someone doing their best to meet you at your point of view. And I think that it's definitely one of the most powerful and one of the most honest sort of literary tools that we have.
Oh, very nice. Nicely stated. I would like to hear about an early experience when you realized that poetic language had power. An early experience.
I'm a huge just, English nerd. Like, I've had to sort of deconstruct, I think, some of the more dogmatic parts of that. But words have had a profound effect on me since I was a young kid. And I remember one of the very first poetry units that we'd done when I was in middle school. I went to a school called Masterman in Philly, which has a little bit of, like a reputation. And we studied Emily Dickinson. And I was always a sensitive kid and a very lonely kid, exactly the kind of kid you expect to gravitate to poetry and, lose themselves in words. But I remember that poem, I am nobody, who are you nobody too? And that resonated with me more deeply than I think anyone would expect from a 12-year-old, however old I was at the time. And that really spoke to me. So I started writing my own poetry really around then. I might have tried my hand at it before, but that was when I really intently just started just filling up my notebooks with my expression, because to me, I didn't know what I thought poetry was before then, but I didn't think it was that.
Okay. All right. So what do you write about? What are some of the predominant themes of your work?
I write about everything that sort of burns within me. And that's why, my first chapbook, the Book of IP, was kind of focused. It had a certain theme to it around sort of my Hollywood life and my experiences there. But this upcoming collection is kind of like a grab bag of me making sense of life experiences that I've had. And it's almost like a diary in a way, sort of like a throwback to when I would write poetry in my diary, but themes about capitalism. Honestly, I think that's one of the most consistent themes. I know we're coming from DC. I hope I don't, we don't get too divided here.
We won't be fighting. No, we won't be fighting.
But
no.
just
right.
really boiling down just what seems to be some of the biggest struggles, some of the biggest questions I've had about demons I've had to fight in my life. And capitalism really was at the root of so much of that. And I apologize for my ums and uhs.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Don't worry about it. You're fine. You sound great. You sound wonderful. Well, you talked about capitalism, and I'm wondering, with that in mind, how does a poem begin for you? With an idea, a form, or an image?
The poem, for me, begins with a feeling, and it begins with really the inner monologue. Sometimes that can be sparked by an image, whether it's something that I see in real time, whether it's something that I'm flashing back to, or whether it's something that I envision, but I don't really begin a poem until my inner monologue, until my inner processing about that image or that feeling really pops up. So the way that I have always processed experience is feeling and thinking at the same time. I don't know. It's everybody's different, but when I feel something, I immediately try and contextualize it in terms of, why am I feeling this way? Is this what I should be feeling? And so I've never been a person who just sort of acts off of emotion. If I feel something, I kind of just sit with it and understand what I'm feeling. And that process, that understanding of that feeling, to me, is poetry once it hits the page, or once it is spoken out loud with intent. That is where that comes from. And I know that's a very sort of unwieldy process, with little regard for form or anything like that, but that's just how I've been doing it.
So you need to compute it first before you act on it. Is that what you're saying?
In a way, yes.
It must compute. It must compute. Okay. You know, Chris Courtney, all great writers have great writing influences. Now, you mentioned Emily Dickinson. Who are some of your other writing influences, and what makes them great in your eyes?
I really look to music is sort of, I hope that's not too disappointing for poets out there. And there are some poets that I absolutely love. You know, I have been like a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan, and sort of learned sort of the controversies about his marriage to his younger cousin, and that that dampens that. But you know, the influence has already embedded itself in you, and you can't unconnect to those verses necessarily. But in terms of musical lyricism, you know, I came from a really music-loving background. So anybody from Stevie Wonder, whose lyrics are just poetry and sonic motion, to, you know, Gil Scott Heron, who is a little bit more known as a poet who does verse to music, opposed to someone who's just a musician or just an artist.
Okay.
So all over the board, really. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, and even the poetry that I found within prose, such as Toni Morrison, huge influences.
You know, I'm old. So when you said sonic motion, what exactly is that? That's a newfangled term that I've never heard. Talk to me.
That's simply how I think of Stevie Wonder poetry and sonic motion. I mean, if you read the lyric sheet to a song like As Around the World, you know, as why am I blanking on the lyrics when I'm
That's okay.
I was around the sun, the earth,
I know the song.
Revolving, right? It's a rosebud knows to bloom in early May. That's a poem on its own. Notwithstanding the beautiful music that he's composed around it. You know, songs like Love's in Need of Love Today. So I really respect his lyricism as standalone poetry.
All right. You know, you wouldn't know this. Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, great. You wouldn't know this, but as I prepared for tonight, right before this show, I was listening. Love's in Need of Love Today.
Wow.
I needed to hear that. Yes. Talk about synchronicity.
Absolutely.
I mean, seriously. I played it back to back to back to back to back. I needed some uplift. That the world needs love today.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of hate going on. All right.
So much.
Miss Courtney, please. Please share a poem.
All right. This one is called Capital Punishment, and it was previously published in Lothlorien Poetry Journal, Volume 14. It's also published in my upcoming collection, Slam Poems for My Bathroom Mirror. Call me broke, because something essential has shattered, all things human in tatters, suckled on the gray of the matter. Pluck up the fat of the land, leave the bones bare, sell it back to me for $400 in a cardboard box marked grave. Vagrant cravings leave me, hateful hungry for the fruit hanging over the fence line. If it serves lemon, even better, for the bitter acid multiplies its sour-sweet vitriol when laced through with the bile in the pit of my echoing bowels. May the spray blind you when I cough up a lung macerated by the venomous atmosphere of your shame. Call me broken on the wheel of your fortune. Thank you.
Wow. I need a second to process what you shared. What is the purpose of that piece, Chris Courtney?
That particular poem is an expression of the violence that people, and it's a very subtle and removed and impersonal sort of violence that people undergo when they're denied basic things like a standard of living, like sustainable housing, things like that. And as someone who has faced homelessness and things like that, and face callousness in sort of systems that are meant to actually aid people in need, that was an interpretation of me sort of really characterizing what I felt was the first blow of really an attempt on my life as somebody who was born in poverty and has done everything right, quote unquote, right, per respectability in order to try and transcend that. But me realizing that, in a way, it's that violence is intentional. And it's a realization that I've made intellectually, as somebody who is, involved in these leftist spaces and all of that, but really allowing myself to feel it. That is what that poem is.
Wow. There's a statement, and I'm sure you've heard it: if you can't feel it, you can't heal it. What do you think about that?
I think that is very true.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question. Based on what you know about the world, your lived experience, does it hurt you to write poetry? If not, why not?
It heals me to write poetry. It has actually been one of the most healing forces in my creative life, for sure. And I've also, I found my way back to music and prose too, after focusing on the screenwriting and producing side of things. But it was a really, really intense purge sort of these past couple of years that I've spent with poetry. And it's a process that I didn't really understand as a healing force when I had first dabbled in it as a teen and a preteen. I didn't really understand it as more than just sort of venting, like in a diary. But it really took me living an adult life to really appreciate that it's not just venting, and venting can be healing, but it's more than that.
Yes.
It's sort of an alchemy that takes that pain and turns it into something other than pain.
Let's flesh that out. Now, are you willing to be hurt by the poetry of others? If not, why not?
Absolutely. Now, when you say that, I take it you mean am I willing to, and correct me if I'm wrong, am I willing to internalize the pain and process it on an empathetic level?
Yes, correct.
From another poet, that's really the human condition of it all. That's what it's for. And granted, there are, I believe, poetic and artistic traditions that are meant to cause pain with rhetoric, the same way propaganda is, and to say, am I willing to be hurt by those sorts of things? The answer is, and maybe I'm just going off course here, the answer to that is I already have been hurt by them, even if I haven't read the words yet, because that is sort of, do you understand? But I'm absolutely willing to engage with the unadulterated emotion of another person through their work. I think that's really what it's about.
So is writing a poem letting your guard down or building a wall?
I think it's one of the most naked things that a person can do, to write that poem and share it with the world. To just put your feelings out there in a way where you aren't explaining, you aren't qualifying necessarily. And I do know there are prose poems, but poetry in its most common form really is just an autonomous expression. Even when we're workshopping poetry in community with other people, I think having workshopped and given notes in different spaces and received notes in different spaces, it's much less about trying to navigate other people's tastes and trying to sort of over democratize the work, as it is about making sure that your work is saying what you want it to say.
Please share a poem.
Absolutely. Okay. So this poem is called Infamilfamous or Similac. Leave it up to Murica to get your baby's beach bod right for the summer. Was that out of line? More so than the better famished than fat school meal plan served up by our establishment, circa change a clock? Leave it up to Murica to let a foundational public good go so catastrophically bad. Infants simply aren't a lucrative demographic, according to the Washington Post. So while skinny teas and appetite lollipops and protein shakes for mad gains and meal replacement bars for hunger pangs and reduced calorie this and that and et cetera, blah, 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 remain a plentiful. Babies heed the panacea Murica prescribes to heal all its ills. They starve. Thank you.
I think I'd like you to share that one again, if you don't mind.
Happily. So for context, this is about the formula shortage that we had some time ago, the baby formula shortage, and it's called Infamilfamous or Similac.
Okay.
Leave it up to Murica to get your baby's beach bod right for the summer. Was that out of line? More so than the better famished than fat school meal plan served up by our establishment, circa change a clock? Leave it up to Murica to let a foundational public good go so catastrophically bad. Infants simply aren't a lucrative demographic, according to the Washington Post. So, while skinny teas and appetite lollipops and protein shakes for mad gains and meal replacement bars for hunger pangs and reduced calorie this and that and et cetera, blah, 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 remain a plentiful, babies heed the panacea Murica prescribes to heal all its ills. They starve.
Wow. They starve. When you write, who drives or who leads, you or the poem?
I think it's me. I think that
Talk to me.
Now, there are instances, because I do use rhyme, not in any of the poems that I've shared so far, even though there's a little bit of rhyme in the first one, not much. I really take the driver's seat in a way where I just say whatever the hell it is I'm feeling. And
right.
that's the aim. That is the aim. I say what I am feeling. Even I have poems that are written from another person's perspective, and I'm still saying what it is that I feel. In terms of form, even that, just somebody who is rhyme and meter oriented, as somebody who is just as in love with music as I am poetry, I'm still driving when I work within a strict form, it's just sort of an interpretation of how that's coming to me. It's not necessarily like, okay, I'm going to write a poem. I'm going to put this poem in a form that has this rhyme scheme, or I'm going to model a poem after this or whatever. It's how I hear it as I'm processing it. And, you know, as somebody who I've been known to rap, sometimes that just happens organically. So I really would say, I know it's a long-winded answer, it's me. It's me at my most me.
All right. Very nice. Your new book that's going to be released any day now, right, a couple of days from now, Slam Poems for My Bathroom Mirror and Other Selected Works, which is a full collection. Tell me about the title first.
Okay, so Slam Poems for My Bathroom Mirror, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I'm not a slam poet. I'm somebody who, my idea of writing is doing the introvert thing, and the most sharing I will do in most cases is posting it. You know, reading out loud is a rarity for me.
Okay.
But it's also an expression of this book as something of a really personal collection, because even though there's a lot of political influence and a lot of subject matter that speaks to worldwide problems as I am interpreting them as an individual, it's still deeply personal. So it's about me reflecting. And, you know, the other selected works, that sort of alludes to a group of poems toward the end that had a slightly different process, more of a channeling process, where I'm pulling in energies that are not necessarily my own. Because I don't know if we've touched on this in this interview at all, but I'm a spiritual medium, and that's something, it's part of my identity that I've come into within the past few years, 4 years maybe, that has just made my whole life make sense. Occurrences that just could not be explained under any other context. So this really is a little bit of a grab bag of my very personal feelings and experiences with a lot of different things, but these things are really a tapestry of who I am now as an adult in my early 30s.
What made you decide to share them? You made this statement, and I'm potentially paraphrasing, an introvert, and the title, For My Bathroom Mirror, that in itself is like, hey, I'm not sharing these with anybody. It's like singing in the shower. I can do this, but I can't take it out in the street. So what made you decide to share them, Chris Courtney?
It was a spiritual push. There's no other way to describe it. Putting poetry out there was something I never saw myself doing. If I ever came back to it, it was not something that I was ever going to pursue seriously, but I had a lot of sort of synchronistic shifts, you know, the story of how this poetry wing of my life as an adult even came about is incredibly just serendipitous. I was talking to a friend of mine who's in the film industry, a director, about just some of the awful things that I've been going through and just sort of trying to get my head together about that. And this friend, with all of the love in the world, she suggested, you know, I don't know if this is stuff that you should be talking about on social media because people they don't want to know in this industry, the empathy, you save the empathy for the screen, right? And she said, and I'm paraphrasing, of course. She said it with all the love and sort of protection and wanting me to be able to have a viable career. And she wasn't wrong. So she said something like, something that I do to vent is I'll write poetry and I'll put it on Tumblr or whatever. And I said, the poetry thing is not really for me. I haven't done it since I was a kid. And then lo and behold, I end up leaving California at the end of that year and coming to stay in Fayetteville with my dad, which is where I am now. And the poetry just came out. The feeling that it started with the Book of IP, which came together way more quickly than sort of any completed project I've ever, completed. And it was really just an expression of how I was feeling about the entertainment industry and also the value that I knew that my work had to me, that I couldn't understand why that value was diluted by all of these just whims and biases, as I call them, within the industry. And so that came together, and it had a reception that I did not expect at all. I didn't think that anyone would ever want to publish it. And so then I said, well, I wonder if, with that being such an obscure, sort of very specific viewpoint, like poems about ideas that should be screenplays, but, the industry has this weird sort of taste. With that being appreciated the way it was, one of the poems was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. I kind of just...
Yes, wow, very nice.
Just kept going on and saying, well, I wonder if there's anything else that I feel like is niche and super specific that nobody else cares about that, might resonate. Anything else that I want to get off my chest that I think might find some sympathetic readers. And so I just kept going.
All right. You did a fantastic job. We're going to take a quick break, but I would like to ask you, please tell me more about the cover of your book. It's quite striking. Actually, both of your books, they're beautiful covers. Tell me about the second one, your full collection.
Thank you. So I'm kind of a one-stop shop as an independent creator. I did the covers for both of my books. The first one, it was a photograph I took that I ran through some photo editing software, like a program kind of like Photoshop. Those are my crystals, and they're sitting on top of my striped towel. But for slam poems, I actually that's a photo of me, a selfie, in high school.
Wow.
And I designed this one, and I think it was Pixlr. It was Pixlr that I designed this. I just sort of, I didn't know what I was going to do for this poem, and there was, at a time where people were starting to use, generate like AI covers and things, and I was like, I'm gonna just put my hands in this and just see what I can come up with, just with little sort of graphic design hobbyist skill I have. And so I took that old picture. I stuck with my favorite color palette, which is purple, purple and black, and I threw some stars around this little frame, and it looked very much like something that I would have loved in high school, and it's something that I still love now. So in fact, it kind of reminds me of my favorite pair of shoes from high school. It's purple and black.
Right. That's nice. We're going to take a brief break, but I've got a question I'd like you to answer when we return. All right, here's the question. There's a lot of controversy around the word accessibility in terms of poetry. Here's the question. Should one employ a lot of mental energy to solve a poem? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, we'll be right back. I think we'll be right back. That was the world's quickest break. We are back. We don't break long, Courtney. We don't break long. So, as you think about my question, how much mental energy should be expended when you are reading a poem, attempting to, or do you need to solve a poem?
Well, this might come just because I'm a little biased in that puzzles and riddles and all of that. That is kind of like one of my jams. That has been one of my favorite sort of literary forms, riddles and word puzzles and things like that since I was a kid. However, I do think that one should only have to expend as much mental energy as is going to be rewarding for them. There are, not every poem is for every person. And I do think, every poem deserves the same amount of energy in the approach. But I think if there is a poem that is about something that is not necessarily going to be so illuminating for you, then you might get the sense of that. And it's okay to walk away and say, I just think that this is just a different sort of vibration for me. That doesn't mean like neglect anything that isn't all about you, because if we do that, how else do we understand other people? But it does sort of, I think, prevent us from doing that thing where we put projections on work that the original writer might actually find silly. Like I call this the participation grade effect, where the red curtains in the room have to symbolize generations of trauma, when it's just that was an actual room that had red curtains. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Please share 2 poems.
Okay. So this next poem is called Rover. Little Ryan passed away, highest time to bash the gaze. All the things you dare not say, how'd she find out who up and told her? Better when I scream and shout, no better way to work it out. And if you hold a seed of doubt, that's planted for the ground gets colder. They say that everything, it happens for a truly good reason. More of an open season. And when the model breaks the mold, the wisdom wasted on the old, silver tongue patinaed gold, life's just begun, alas, it's over. Never thought we'd have the nerve, strength of vision, nor the verve, needed to hold it on reserve, in case we don't get through October. You say that everything that happened, it only made you better. Ruby slippers pair with scarlet letter. At the waist, I lean to bow, in gratitude to see the now. How far a stretch we do avow, since Joan once sang crimson and clover. And when the moon has set on us, we say a prayer for the dust. The way it fades echoes the trust of those who live to bend us over. I know it had to happen without a rhyme or a reason. A boarded door to slip limp keys in. Love a wheel that likes to squeak, like a girl who loves to heat. On every word you choose to speak, just dangling from the cliffs of Dover. When I begin to need a hand, slide me a little contraband, hoping for a heart to brand. Come over, Rover. Thank you.
All right. How did you structure the poems in your second book? Chapters, sections, how are they structured?
So the first section and thank you for asking that, because that might get a little confusing. The first section is simply the slam poems, which I wrote just getting things off my chest. I know that's a very vague phrase, but writing about things that I have sort of not been able to grapple with on an emotional level, processing things like that last poem that I just read, coming to terms with queer identity, having been raised in a very sort of not amenable structure for that, by a parent whom I'm not in touch with anymore. And just sort of having a thought and intentionally for a period of time having a thought and a feeling and not just letting them pass, just allowing myself to process them on paper. So I just had pages and pages of Google Docs files of me just processing things as they came to me. And that first section, I just structured those in alphabetical order. In the next section of poems, there are works that came to me through just feeling other energies around me, and spirit, the sort of, they say woo-woo spirituality. They call it the higher self, where you're interacting with another person's consciousness. You feel their energy. Sometimes you might physically feel yourself moving like them, or what have you. And so I decided not to name the energies that I knew were coming to me, just to keep things simple and reduce speculation. But I knew who they were, and maybe one day that they'll know who they are. However, I know you said 2 poems. I would like to read a poem from that section, where
please.
I channel in conversation with the energies of redacted higher selves. So,
all right, very nice.
This one comes from the alpha section, which is a one energy, and then the beta section is another energy. Okay. This one is called the Unsonnet. Our friend told me, if I could pray for you all these years, then I'm well within my right to write these words with confidence. What's behind your eyes may be lost upon others, trapped in the shallow waters of their coloring, but I found something familiar there. We were children together, apart, spaced by worlds and continents, yet brushed against one like boar's hair kissing dampened canvas. Forgive my turn of phrase, as I know it doesn't serve to serve you. Pretense on a platter smith from any metal. And there's an emptiness in my chest when I know, which I know is no stranger to you, when you recite Chaucer for her friend, or whatever it takes to keep you at the grown-up table. Our friend says you may take exception to that. I say that you are too exceptional to deny it. Thank you.
Wow. Courtney, what do you think makes your poetic voice different? And I guess you could say, well, all voices are different. But as you think about your work, What makes your voice different?
Well, I mean, that is sort of my first instinctive answer, and I know it's the easy one. We're all snowflakes, and it's true. It's true. Everyone's voice has just like everyone's spoken voice is so distinct that it could be completely, distinguished from another person's if you measure the sound waves and all of that. I think that's true of your spiritual, artistic voice. Something that I enjoy when I sort of read my poetry back is I think I write with a level of irreverence that I don't necessarily express in any other facet of my life. I just I just kind of say what I feel in poetry, and I'm not afraid to be flippant. I'm not afraid to make jokes, and I think that something that makes poetry a little inaccessible to some people is that it can come off as self-serious in ways that other art forms don't. And of course, that's a very limited scope of poetry because we know there are humorous poets. But the stuff that we're typically accessing, the stuff that is usually part of the canon, usually is very sort of self-serious kind of stuff. And the way that I express myself in my poetry, it's kind of like talking to my best friend, but in a code that maybe only will understand, but you get my voice, you get my intention, and just being able to trust you'll get my voice, you'll get my intention if we're on the same wavelength. That's just my personal take, and I haven't workshopped anything this whole time with anyone else. So
Okay. All right. So what compelled you to share the last piece? You said you wanted to share it. What compelled you to do that?
I just wanted to share from that section because I definitely felt a difference in energy when I wrote it. And I'm just curious as to whether readers or anybody else will be able to sort of pick up on the difference in my voice in the first section versus this voice that's in conversation with another energy in the alpha section and the beta section toward the end.
With that in mind, I'd like you to read another poem from that section. Please.
Okay. So I am actually, if you don't mind, going to go into the beta section, which is the same concept, different energy that I'm interacting with. Then this one is called Ivory Tower. It's actually one of my favorites. Throw down a roped lock of hair, descend an ivory tower, beset an oceanic stare, to rare celestial flower. A treasure lines soft ruby walls, ambrosia flows and cascade falls. Sound lost on plush upholstered halls as bells sing midnight hours outside the ivory tower. A calling call flees raven maw in twilight's trembling power. The second vine-like creeping crawl beneath moonlight's silver shower. A man has never felt so tall, on knees now aching, carpet raw. Half staggered breath threatens to stall, and dark delights devour, abreast the ivory tower. Fill cup full up, summarily sup, with fruit more sweet than sour. Lest we forget, still stands erect, that robust ivory tower. Thank you.
Wow. You know, when I listen to you, the last two poems, for some reason I just see you sitting on top of a cloud. I'm serious. That's what I see. That everything is right with the world. With the first set, some rain was falling.
Mm-hmm.
There was a storm. And not that you were unable to make it through the storm, you did, but there was a storm. But on this side, there is no storm. That there's clarity. I don't know, that's just my take. That's just my take.
And I really thank you for sharing that, because that resonates. It resonates, but it's not something that I thought about until now. And I think maybe that's confirmation that when I am sort of open to this channeling process that I have, yes, and allowing myself to spiritually be in conversation on another sort of plane that's not the 3D plane, that maybe I am sort of living my fullest truth. And if that can be heard just in the recitation of different poems, then that's got to be like a huge sign from the divine. So
yes,
thank you for that.
Yes. So how would you classify your ability to write poetry? As a creative gift or creative art?
I look at it as a gift from my end. I know that the difference, and don't get me wrong, gifts need to be honed, and they need to be practiced, and they need to be thought about in order to be their most effective. However, when I think of a gift versus an art, a gift is a lot more autonomous. And, you know, in art form, it's like a lot of the time you have to really intensely do not just independent study, but group study in a certain way.
Yes.
And, you know, I even have a poem about this. Before I started writing poetry, it wasn't like I was reading poetry every single day. And I know this is going to ruffle a lot of feathers. I hope this doesn't make me like an outsider or an interloper or an imposter, but my sort of poetic literacy is not as deep and intentional as some people who are in some of these same spaces. So I do think that that's also kind of indicative of my, not my reluctance, but my lack of experience in sharing my work in public spaces, because I would feel like maybe I'm the new kid on the block, and people come up to me afterward and want to talk about their top 10. I might maybe know 2.
Yes, hey, me too. Me too. So you're not alone. You're not alone. So if my saying that helps normalizes it, you're not alone at all.
I appreciate that. That makes me feel a lot better.
No. And think about it. I've had over 400 poets on this show. And people calling all the time trying to get on here. I don't talk about the mechanics, the technical kinds of things, because I wasn't trained in that area. But I talk about what I know, what I feel. And I feel that's important too. And that's what you do. You write about what you know, what you feel. And that's important.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Absolutely.
So, Courtney, we live in a world where there's good, bad, ugly, as well as indifferent. What do you view as being the role of a poet then in modern day society?
I think the poet's responsibility, the poet's role, first of all, is to explore themselves in relation to the world. And I think there is sometimes there's there is a mad dash, if you will, to use poetry to express something that is the moment. To sort of like sometimes there's a mad dash to comment on via social media on things, and I understand that. I understand that we're talking about things, we're raising awareness of things because it's important, and if you don't call it out, you're complicit. However, I think that sometimes that tendency can overtake us understanding who we are in that role, and what we say about it will sometimes be informed by something we don't fully understand yet. So I do think that the poet's responsibility is to know thyself first.
Okay.
And then use that as a way to relate with the outside world. And that doesn't mean navel gaze. That just means really understand your emotional language and intellectual language before you can use it as powerfully to affect change, I believe, as possible.
You know, as I listen to you, I can see you teaching classes on poetry, on the use of poetry. Yes, I'm serious. And I'm too old to say things I don't mean. So I really can, because you have a way of expressing your thoughts that is, like I say, clarity. That's accessible. So one of the things I would always share with my students before I retired is that never forget what you bring to the table, because it can always serve you when you least expect it. So the gift that you bring, other people don't bring. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I don't know what made me want to tell you that, but I think just continue to blossom and grow and share your talent with the world, because you got something to say.
Wow, that means so much to me, and I know that absolutely that is something that I needed to hear. I've always dreamed of being an educator, and I didn't take sort of the normal route of, you know, getting a pedagogical degree, just because it just wasn't right for me. But whatever I go out in the world to learn, I've always dreamed of being able to bring that back. And it's I'm getting a little bit emotional here, because that's
all right. That's all right. That's all right. We're together. I'm not going anywhere.
Something I tried to do as a screenwriter. You know, just, and I know I'm not super duper. I'm not super duper well known or anything like that, but I feel like I've functioned enough. Definitely as much as some people who have been able to find teaching roles and stuff like that. And when I sort of, you know, tried to go back to my alma mater for some opportunities, the consensus was I didn't have enough experience, or with my level of experience, I'd also need a higher degree, which I understand. But I also say that there is such a validation that I found in the poetry community, including just how wonderful you've been, and that wonderful you know, gift you offered me in encouraging me that way, because, you know, I've actually been in talks with a professor to introduce some of my work into the classroom at the university level. We're actually going to be talking a little bit about that this winter and preparing for that. So just knowing that I have been doing this for just a fraction of the time that I've been screenwriting, and I'm finding appreciation that I've been, sort of hoping for elsewhere. It just really puts this community in a special place in my heart, and I'll never forget that.
Well, I mean, you're not missing anything to me. You sound great. I mean, hey, like I said again, I take your class.
Wow.
Because I know that you'd have something to share that I could use. And if I couldn't use it, I mean, I put it in a folder and whatever, and I save it for another day if it wasn't resonating at that particular time. Because I always believe there's always something new we can pick up. You may not need it then, but that doesn't mean you won't have it. And that is so important. Chris Courtney, we've reached a point in the program that's my personal favorite. I view it as being a mini, MINI, poetry concert. This is an opportunity for you to share 3 or 4 of your works back to back, no interruptions from me. Okay?
Okay.
You're on the stage.
All right. This one is called Enough. It was previously published in Arato magazine. Nothing I do is right enough. No hope I hold is bright enough. No laugh I loose is light enough. No one I love is here enough. No song I sing is clear enough. No truth I keep is dear enough. No way I make is door enough. Nothing I know is sure enough. No ground I tread is floor enough. No wish I have is dream enough. No shouts I roar are scream enough. No crop I reap yields cream enough. No acreage is wood enough. No covering is hood enough. Nothing I am is good enough. Okay. This next one is called Redfish, Bluefish. Today, I bit into a cucumber, which prickled my tongue with the offensive, earwaxy taste of poison. And at that exact moment, my vice president was on the news, on a reel about the abortion laws, which followed the reel about farmers suffering in this economy. The vice president said that the vast majority of people in this country wish for abortion to be a federally protected right. I nodded my agreement. Yet, at that exact moment, my stomach filled with dread, and I wondered with respect to my position just a handful of miles off the military base, whether that cucumber was indeed poisoned, whether that poison was indeed intended for me. Because I could look her in the face through a screen and know without pause in my nauseous gut that she was full of it. And it wasn't what she said, because that was factually, commonsensically true. The proposed bans had us of sound heart and mind rightfully teeming on the edge of our own insurrection, one that would be far more intelligent and far more successful than the one which targeted Alex Ocasio-Cortez. It was the unmoving void in Madam Vice President's eyes. It taunted me that I had been right to suspect that, with minimal exceptions, neither of these primary colored cancers we call representative parties could care any less about the ants which scream and scatter in hopes of escaping their spyglass magnified ultraviolet beams at the base of Mount Olympus. That gut of mine threatened to spew its contents until liquid and green, but continued to speak thusly. They knew their colleagues would do this, and they let them. These noble crusaders in dignified blue are resigned to the federal These noble crusaders in dignified blue are resigned to the federal fire department Every 4 years, then every 2, we must call upon them begging and pleading that they extinguish the choking blaze with a spray of mercy pumped from trucks which trail their own corrosive combustible fuel. They too bleed gold, and they have seen dissenters poisoned for knowing less. Okay. This next one is called The Lovecrafts. Howard Phillips Lovecraft must have wondered what his white supremacy did for him, for his pappy, for his mammy, for his maiden aunts, for his soiled pants. Howard Phillips Lovecraft must have looked in the mirror and felt as affirmed in his art as his favored fellow brown-eyed Aryan. Beg the question, learn the lesson. Sonia Haft-Green Lovecraft Davis most certainly pondered, frowned upon his pallid face with pity, questioned why he clung to the taunting of the city. What do you need, Howie? Another wild screed, Howie? And if we breed, Howie? Sure of your creed, Howie? This next one is called The Money Monster, and it was previously published in Arato magazine. The money monster is back again, rasping against my ear, stoking up my fear, bids me disappear. The money monster clings to me, breathing down my nape, bending out of shape, taunts me, no escape. I buried it with spade and hope. It found me decked with blade and rope, a reach which gropes beyond the scope of mere mortal's resistance. I am offered no assistance. The money monster has its way with bones of one who could not pay. Okay, I believe that was 4.
All right. Thank you. Chris Courtney, what do you think your work conveys about the human condition?
I think that my work in particular taps into things that a lot of people are afraid to say out loud.
Okay.
Not because they aren't true, but because of the dangers associated with them, because they are, for now, unpopular. And I think of a lot of the poems, a lot of the artists that came out of the Black arts movement, and how they were controversial at the time, and how they were considered radicals, and a lot of those folks who had like affiliation with the Black Panther Party, how they were looked at. And I think that there is, and maybe this comes down to just my lack of having been able to read a lot of the people who are out there doing the same kind of work in literature. But I do think that is a piece that is missing sort of on the main stage of poetry. I mean, I think of poems like The Hill We Climb, because I love Amanda Gorman, and
yes,
she is one of the biggest inspirations to me right now, that beautiful young sister. But I think of how poems like that are the poems that are promoted and sanctioned as the representative. And I think about how there's another side of that, where, you know, the hill that we climb is filled with a lot more minefields.
You got that right.
and
That's true.
then a poem like that would be able to touch on in the form in which it was used. And so I just offer a voice, I think, for calling out and really validating the hurt and the anger that a lot of people have for the things that remain unsaid on the main stage, the poems that will never be read on the White House steps. And you know, I know that's not a maybe necessarily a bestseller kind of stance to take as a poet.
All right.
I mean, and if you're in it for money, I mean, what are you doing anyway? But I do think that is a people's poetry, and you know, if these poems get shared as screenshots, and I barely make money off this book ever, just knowing that it contains, you know, something that the people resonate with, that is really the point.
Okay. So, who is your target audience? Are you hoping to reach a wide range of readers, or are you looking to find a particular group?
I hope to reach a wide range of readers, but I hope to represent a group of people who have been gaslit about the things that they find important. And, you know, that is not a small group of people. I definitely, I write for people who are crushed under the weight of the status quo. And I write for people who are struggling between, you know, their identity being so tied to being crushed under that weight and all the things they have done, quote unquote, right to try and get out from under it. And the guilt that's associated with that, you know, right, wrong, or both or neither. And, you know, people who are just trying to be honest about what it looks like to get themselves free under a system where a lot of the time we are strategically rigged so that our freedom, pulling ourselves up, means sinking somebody else below.
Wow.
So that's I think that's probably the biggest lens that informed just this stage of poetry, especially with the capitalism critique work and stuff. And that's not all this book is. It's just been a big issue in my life. And I know generationally, I'm not alone.
No, you're not alone. No, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to favor us with one more before we go? Please?
Absolutely.
Pretty please?
Absolutely. This one is called The Way It Is. You can't afford to fix your teeth, but that's the way it is. Your best friend's buried down beneath, but that's the way it is. She couldn't take the pain inside, hardly could buy the pills prescribed. The college board cast her aside, but that's the way it is. You can't afford to pay your debt, but that's the way it is. Ran out of blood and tears and sweat, but that's the way it is. Ain't got the car to get the gig. The TV says you're too damn big. You're skipping meals, still you're the pig, and that's the way it is. You should have got an army stamp to change the way it is. Never mind the vagabond and tramp, enlisted when there's kids. A couple limbs for Uncle Sam, a cup of beans straight from the can. But you can't get mad at the man. That's just the way it is. I know this tower's got to fall. I know the way it is. We're bringing down the fucking walls. It's blowing off the lid. Crystallize the last few hundred years. Vampirize the basis of our fears. Reparations owed in the arrears. Holding fast to how it is. When your father is a capitalist, don't you wish he kept his jizz? Thank you.
Wow. Through writing slam poems, what have you learned about yourself, Chris Courtney?
Wow, I've learned that there are a lot of voices. And that is something that is something that gets quite literally demonized and pathologized. But there are a lot of voices within one voice. It's like any given voice is a choir of different voices. And I think that accepting that is healing, and it normalizes and rehumanizes parts of the human condition that I think were kind of systemically removed for, the benefit of the powers that be. But learning to be okay, just hearing the different voices that I have to express, even when I read one poem one way, read a poem another way, in our head, especially as Black people, there's the question of code switching and all of that.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And it's something that can drive you up the wall and make you wonder. It can make you wonder if you are a lie of a person, if you don't hold space for why that exists. And it's something that again is being healed, I think, as I read my words back and I read them back. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do that.
Oh yes, we're not done. We're not done. I would like to know, do you think you were meant to be a poet based on what you know about the world and your lived experience? Do you think you were meant to be a poet?
I absolutely do. Okay. I absolutely believe that. I know I was meant to be a lot of things, but a poet is one of them.
What surprises you most about being a poet?
Let's see. The thing that was the most surprising, honestly, is that, and this is the beauty of this community, which I know is not a monolith, but the beauty of what I found in this community is the more that I try and qualify my inexperience, and the more that I express that I am insecure, the more love and acceptance I find, and the more friends I make, and that is just, it is the sign that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And as somebody who I've been a writer my whole life. The first story that I remember writing, sitting down and writing to completion in a way that I loved was in a third grade class. I was 8 years old, and I've been writing ever since. But I think having rooted my identity in I'm a screenwriter for so long, since I was 19, 18, 19, starting in college. I'm a screenwriter was what my artistic identity was rooted in. And that has been, even though I'm not leaving the film industry, that has been sort of just so maddening what it takes to hold on to that identity. So I think rooting myself in I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I'm an artist, period. I think that is what I need to do to feel free.
Where do you go from here, Courtney? What's next for you creatively? You've got the book coming out later this week, and your birthday is coming up.
Yes.
Where do you go from here?
So creatively, I mean, I have some more music to release at the top of next year or end of this year. I haven't decided. It was going to be another EP. It's going to be just an instrumental album. The first EP is technically a micro album because it's more than 6 songs, but I'm going for like 12 or 15 songs for this next release. So I'm wrapping that up. And, with the Hollywood strikes, one half of them is still going on. The writer side of it has opened back up, but, when we are back full-fledged, I want to continue building some projects that I was working on up until the point where the strikes were called. And I'm actually so glad you asked this because I'm directing my first documentary feature, and we're entering. Yes, we're entering. And the way that happened was just so wild and serendipitous. But we're entering production. It's going to be a lot of just remote interview footage, and it's a American Australian co-production with the beautiful Dr. Kylie P. Harris, who is a brilliant, wonderful friend of mine. And what this does is it takes a lot of indigenous and non-Western sort of estimations of spiritual emergence, which can sometimes or oftentimes be pathologized in the West, and it privileges voices who understand the greater global context around that. So I'm so excited to be able to talk to indigenous scholars and healers and elders and people who are well-versed in other philosophies outside of, the medical industrial complex to make sense of what people consider mania to be. So we stand on the shoulders of some,
you can stop right. You can stop right there. You bring so much to the table. The table is full. The table is full. We don't need another dish on the table. You brought everything.
Well, I try.
You are top notch. I am so proud of you. And too, we only have like 60 seconds left. But 30 now. I wish you nothing but continued success. You're incredible.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm serious. Look at all the stuff you're talking about. We need another 30 minutes for you to finish. Wow, you got it going on.
Thank you, and that means so much.
What is true? I had to stop you. You had so many projects. Again, I plan to follow your career. I really do. Where can we purchase the book?
So
Slam Poems.
Yeah.
For my bathroom mirror. Okay.
Slam Poems from My Bathroom Mirror will be available via Alien Buddha Press. Right now they print through Amazon, which I know, anti-capitalist. printing
That's
through
right.
Amazon. I know. No ethical consumption. But I am working really, really, really hard to try and figure out just a model that's going to get the stuff out there and also, move away from the machine. But Alien Buddha, they're the best guys in the indie publishing world. They're wonderful. Red, the press owner, is just a wonderful guy who's given a platform to so many wonderful voices. I mean, that the roster of writers is just top notch. Just top notch.
Well, I'm not surprised that you're among them. I'm really not. Your poetry is well crafted and it's timely, and we need to hear it. You're right. We need to hear both sides. There's the good, the bad, the ugly, and the indifference, and you can't deny that it's all there.
Yeah.
You know? You can't. Well, all right. I am so glad that I had the opportunity to talk with you. You are amazing. You made my day. You made my night.
Thank you. It has been fantastic getting to talk to you, and I would love to stay in touch for sure.
Yes. I'd like you to come back in 2024, and we could think of another program, okay?
Yes, please. I just say when.
Okay. Well, I'd like you to think of an idea that you'd like to talk about, because you'll take the lead. You'll be the professor that night. You'll be the person taking the lead. So whatever it is you want to talk about, whether it's poetry, I don't care what it is, you're welcome back here.
Okay, maybe I'll have a little bit more to share about, the film side of things, and maybe the marriage between that and poetry.
Oh, wow. Oh, see? I don't want to let you go, but we need to go. Because we run out of time. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the listening audience for tuning in, as you do every time we're together. And as I share with you, let poetry ring somewhere throughout the land. Chris Courtney Martin, take care. Good night.
All right. Good night.
Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio, is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also check out the website at qlpor.com.